All right, let's dive into a really big shift happening in the business world. It's called the EU's Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, or CSRD for short. Now, if you've never heard of it, no worries at all. By the end of this, you're going to have a super clear picture of what it is and what it means for companies as we head into 2026. So let's start with a core question. Think about any big company you know. Does the outside world, things like climate change or what's happening in society, affect how well that company does? Or is it the other way around? Do the company's actions affect the world? Well, the answer is pretty simple. It's both. And that idea right there is the foundation for this entire regulation. And this concept, it actually has a name. It's called double materiality. I know, it sounds a little jargony, but all it really means is that impact is a two-way street. The CSRD is basically saying companies now have to report on traffic moving in both directions on that street. And this slide breaks it down perfectly. So on one side, you've got the outside-in view. That's what we call financial materiality. Think about it. How do sustainability issues, like a major drought making it way more expensive to ship goods by river, end up hitting a company's profits? Then on the other side, you have inside-out, or impact materiality. How does that same company's factory, impact the local environment? The huge message of the CSRD is that you can't just talk about one of these without also talking about the other. They're connected. Okay, so now that we've got that core idea of double materiality down, here's the game plan for the rest of our chat. We'll nail down what the CSRD really is, figure out who has to report after some pretty big changes, see how that reporting actually works, and then wrap up with why any of this matters to you. So, first up, what in the world is this directive? To put it simply, the CSRD is basically a new rulebook from the European Union. It forces certain companies to be really open and honest about how they're performing on sustainability. And that means way more than just their financial results. We're talking about their real-world impact on everything, from the climate and pollution to their own workers and even human rights across their supply chain. But why do this? What's the point? Well, the main goal is to get all these companies speaking the same language. It creates a level playing field, which makes it way easier to actually compare whether company A is truly more sustainable than company B. And that transparency empowers literally everyone, from huge investors to you as a customer, to make smarter choices based on a company's total impact, not just its profit margin. All right, so which companies actually have to follow all these new rules? This is where things get really interesting, because the list of companies just went through a major haircut. So in 2025, the EU rolled out something called the Omnibus Package. Basically, they got a lot of feedback that the original rules were just too broad and might swamp smaller companies with paperwork. So to lighten that load and really zero in on the biggest fish, they simplified things. And the single biggest result? The number of companies that have to report at all shrank dramatically. And just look at this slide to see how big of a change we're talking about. Before, a company was considered large if it had over 250 employees or 50 million euros in turnover. Now, to be covered by the rule, a company needs over 1,000 employees and over 450 million euros in turnover. Did you catch that? The keyword flipped from or to and the numbers just skyrocketed. This single move took a massive number of businesses, especially the medium-sized ones, completely out of the picture. And this visual just says it all, doesn't it? That big outer circle was the original plan for who had to report. After these changes, we're left with just that much smaller circle in the middle. The focus has really been narrowed down to just the absolute biggest corporate players out there. So the next logical question is, what about companies that aren't even based in the EU? An American or Japanese company. Does this law just not apply to them? Well, not so fast. The EU has rules for that too. This flowchart maps it out for us, so let's just walk through it. The first question is about revenue. Did the company's entire global group make more than 450 million euros inside the EU for the last 2 years? If the answer is no, they're off the hook. But if it's yes, we go to the next check. Do they have a pretty big presence here, like a major subsidiary or a large branch office? If the answer to that is also yes, then bam, that non-EU parent company has to report on its entire global operation. Okay, so let's say you're one of these huge companies that has to report. What does that actually look like? How does it work? Well, it's not a free-for-all where companies can just write whatever they want. They have to follow a very specific set of rules called the European Sustainability Reporting Standards, or ESRS. And these standards are built around the three pillars of what we call ESG. You've got E for environmental, thanks CO2 emissions, water use, biodiversity. S is for social, how do you treat your own employees and the workers in your supply chain? And G is for governance, which is all about how the company is run, its business ethics, and how it handles risk. Now, here's a really crucial part. This reporting isn't just about what's happening inside the company's own buildings. It covers the entire value chain, all the way from the tiny suppliers providing raw materials to the final customer. And that created a potential headache, right? What if you're a small family business that happens to supply one of these giant corporations? Are you suddenly going to get buried under mountains of data requests? The good news is the answer is no. And that's thanks to something called the value chain cap. It's basically a shield for small businesses. The big company can still ask its small supplier for data, but the cap gives that supplier the right to provide only a limited, standardized set of information. It stops the reporting burden from just trickling down and crushing the little guys. And one last thing. Companies can't just type up this report, publish it, and call it a day. The information has to be checked by an independent third party, like an auditor. This process is called assurance, and it's absolutely vital for making sure the information is credible. For now, the rule is limited assurance, which is a basic check to make sure there are no glaring errors and that the company followed the rules. It's a really important first step toward trustworthy data. Okay, we have covered a lot of the technical stuff, but let's get to what's probably the most important question of all. Why on earth should any of this matter to you? This actually affects your world in some pretty direct ways. First, as a consumer, you're going to get reliable data to see which companies are really walking the walk on sustainability. Second, and this is a big one for you, it's creating a wave of new jobs in fields like ESG, data analysis, and consulting. This is a booming career area. And honestly, whether you end up becoming an investor, an employee, or a CEO, understanding this stuff isn't just a nice-to-have anymore, it's a core part of modern business. And this quote from Deloitte really nails the bigger picture. The specific rules might change over time, but the underlying issues, climate change, scarce resources, social issues, those things aren't going anywhere. Knowing how businesses are dealing with these massive challenges is going to be an essential skill no matter what you do. So we'll leave you with this to think about. As all this new, detailed information starts coming out, which of these corporate impacts on the climate, on communities, on their own workers, do you think is the most important one to be paying attention to? Thanks for tuning in.